Thank you for listening to the Shanghai Community Fellowship Podcast. To find out more about the SCF community, listen to sermons, and upcoming events, visit us at shanghaifellowship.org. Today, before we get on to next week, today I'm finishing up a series called Witness, which I started 2 weeks ago. This is number 3, and we've been in this series called Witness. And, along the way, I've kind of enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot of things. And one of the things I've learned is that how significant this word and concept is in the Bible. That the idea that God would have a people, and not just one witness, not randomly, there's a witness over there or there's a witness over there, but he would have actually a whole community, and there would be a people group on the earth who would, as a people, be his witness. And this whole idea is almost from the very beginning. You kind of open up your Bible, go back to the beginning, and you just see it introduced early on that God is calling his people to be a witness. And you look at what they're called to do, and so often, I think you could say it this way. He's saying to this people, and if you're a follower of Jesus, you're in that community as well, you and I together. He's saying to them basically, you know who I am, you know my identity, you have seen and been witness to the events that demonstrate my identity, my life, my death, and resurrection, and maybe just as important, you are a witness to what has happened between you and me. This is God speaking. So he's asking us and calling us to be these witnesses because we know who he is. We can identify him. We know why he's come. We witness his resurrection power and his ascension and the Spirit's presence because he is a resurrected and ascended Lord. And we are witnesses to what transpired between him and me and between him and us. And this makes us his witnesses. We are witnesses, of course, to good news. We are witnesses to the good news that is in Jesus. And you could say it this way, the gospel, or which is just another way to say good news, is not just only the good news about Jesus, it's the good news that is in Jesus. You could also make them parallel or synonymous. The good news is Jesus, and Jesus is the good news. I don't know, and I'm not suggesting that every person who on the planet thinks this about God, but I think there are plenty who do, to think that God, what God is really about and what Christians are about, and the message that Christians have for the world is, hey, listen, God has a lot of things for you to do, and he really wants you to do them. And if you don't do them, he's going to be mad at you, and he's going to send you right to hell. And I think sometimes the confusion is that is our message, that people think that's our message. God is sending people to hell because they won't do what he wants them to do. And if somebody says, well, that doesn't sound like very good news, well, you kind of would agree with them. That doesn't sound like really good news. And I would like to challenge that this may not and isn't really our message. Because the message of Christ is that God has come to save us from where we were already going. To put it bluntly, we were already going to hell. And the good news is that he has come to save us from going there. And that is good news. I was already headed toward a terminal end. I already have a terminal diagnosis hanging over my head. The day of my death has already been determined. What God is promising us and what makes this good news is that he is going to save us to live the life that we were intended to live. He purposed for you and I to live. I don't know if you know this or not, but the message of the gospel is that you and I were meant to live beyond the grave. So, and I'm talking now about our physical death. So whatever that day ends up to be for us, that the message of the gospel is that you and I were meant to live beyond that in a life that God gives in Jesus. And the good news of this life, this gift of life that God has given in Christ, is that you don't have to die before you ever have a chance to live it. And I hesitated to use this as an illustration because it's not something to take lightly. But how many times, if not every time, that you hear of the death of a child or a young person? So often we measure the tragedy of that because they never got to live the life that they could have lived. We sense the tragic circumstances of the death of a younger person because of the loss of the promised years. What God's good news is to us is that the promise of your future is not going to be lost because you died too young. Because He is saving us from that death so that we might live eternally in life with Him, in love with Him, thriving and flourishing for all of eternity with Him, in partnership with Him. And this is the good news that God has come to save us from the death we were already dying. And that's good news. Actually, that's very good news. That is very good news. We talked about this last week. We said that Satan blinds people to this good news. It's why your friends can't see it. It's why you couldn't see it before you started following Jesus. Maybe you knew some Christians and they were telling you about Jesus and about their faith in Him and inviting you to their church or their Bible study or getting you to read some Bible verses, and they seemed all excited and just, really like they found something, but you're like, I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't understand what you guys are talking about. Satan is blinding the eyes of people so that we think, that they think, we think that God is mad at us, that He's sending us to hell because He doesn't like us. He wants us to be eternally destroyed, on and on and on, blinding the eyes of those who cannot see that God really has good news for us. He's going to spare us. He's going to deliver us, save us from the death we're already dying so that we could really live with Him. We do not live in a world where this phenomenon is not true. So our family members and our friends and our coworkers who don't get you because as you follow Jesus and your religious life or your spirituality and they don't get it, in fact, they might just be even frustrated with you, their eyes have been blinded. We don't live in a world, as I said, where this phenomenon is not true. However, neither do we live in a world where when one of Jesus' witnesses, or when we as a community of witness bear witness to Jesus Christ, and we do this with a servant's heart and with credibility and with a heart of love, that God does not open blind eyes. If it's true in this world that people's eyes are blinded by Satan to the love and the grace and mercy of God, then it is also true that when His witnesses are bearing witness to Him with credibility and a servant's heart, God is also still opening the hearts of blind eyes. He opened my eyes. He opened your eyes. You were one of those blind people once. I was one of those blind people once. He opened our eyes to see that there is good news in Jesus. There's life in Jesus. As Jesus was bringing His disciples, you can read about this in the Gospels, he's bringing them forward almost on a timeline. He's been with them for those 3 years. He's lived with them. He's shown them life. He's established this foundation of relationship with them. He has died on the cross. And, of course, they are devastated and confused. But then just a few days later, He is risen again. And they're shocked but delighted. Like, maybe we might say beside themselves with, wow, because there are broken hearts, Luke chapter 24, and then there is amazement and wonder and delight. Jesus is alive. Jesus is risen. He's alive. Not because He passed out on the cross and became unconscious and they mistakenly thought He was dead, buried Him, and then He woke up. No. He had actually died, was dead for 3 days, and He is now alive. Jesus is bringing them forward to a place. He said, go and meet me in Galilee. I want to meet you there. And he begins to speak to them about what is coming next. Now, in just a short time, they are going to see him what's called ascend to the Father. He's going to go to the Father. He's going to go to Father God. And then he's going to empower them with his Spirit. And we pick this up in Acts chapter 1, verse 1. And Jesus said to them, "It's not for you to know the times or the dates the Father has set by his own authority. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." And after he said this, he was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. They were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them, men of Galilee. They said, "Why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven." Jesus commissions us at the ascension, and he equips us at Pentecost. In Matthew 28, verses 19 to 20, Jesus makes a statement, he gives a command, and then he makes a promise to all of us who are following him. There he said, "All authority in heaven and on earth have been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." As Michael Lloyd wrote, Jesus claims all authority, all of it, not just some, but all authority, a claim that the resurrection and ascension make good and the cross makes safe. Only the wounded hands of the Son of God could hold all authority and hold it for our good. So all authority, all nations, all things I have commanded you, always. This is what it means to be a witness. And this is what it means to be a community of witnesses today with Christ, who holds all authority for us to go into all nations. As witnesses to the ascended Lord Jesus Christ, we are witnesses to his earthly life. We are witnesses that he is at the right hand of the Father. As witnesses, we are witnesses to this two-part exalting of Christ, that he is both resurrected and ascended. This is not a message on the ascension. I think I'm going to do that maybe later in the year, February, I think, or the June. But, because sometimes in the Christian calendar, we just kind of blow right by the ascension. Like, oh, Jesus was ascended. Okay, what happened next? But the fact that Jesus has ascended to the Father is so significant for us, we need to take some time with that. He's resurrected and he's ascended. We are witnesses to the exaltation of his humanity. Did you realize that Jesus, being fully God and fully man, and then ascended to the Father, fully God and fully man, that all of humanity is now represented before the throne room of God? So everybody in Gaza, everyone in Israel, everyone in Ukraine, everyone in Russia, everyone in the United States, everyone in China, every person everywhere now has a place of prominence and authority there in the presence of the throne of God, because the God-man Jesus is there as our representative. We are witnesses to God's commitment to redeem, buy back, and restore. I mean, this might be a bit of a stretch, but if he had never been fully us and came to be God among us, but only God among us, then he goes back to heaven and says, whew, that was really messy down there. I don't know what's going to happen to those humans, but I'm sure glad I'm not a part of it. No, he bound and bonded himself to us so that we would never be separate from him. And he is connected to us in a way that he would never leave us. And as impossible and ridiculous and absurd and tragic as we treat ourselves and each other, he intends to redeem us and restore us and save us. This is still our Father's world. And he intends on taking it back and making it his own. We are witness to this. We are witnesses to the presence of the Holy Spirit in our world today. Now, when Jesus talked about our being witnesses, he he uses metaphors to help us to get an idea of what he meant. You know, you guys are going to be my witnesses, right? And you can imagine them and maybe us today saying, what do you mean? And what does that look like? And how would that happen? And so he uses these three metaphors to help us get it. He said, okay, so you're going to be like salt. You're going to be my witnesses. He said, you're going to be like salt. You're going to be like light. And you're going to be like fruit. You say, well, that doesn't help us a lot. Salt, light, and fruit. You know, all right, but he goes on. He doesn't just leave us those words there. He's going to say to us, he is saying to us that the people we are becoming are the people who are going to be his witnesses. We are going to become witnesses. By the way, this is not to take down a notch or two the things that we say because we are witnesses. That's still very important. There's another place in the Bible that says that we should always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us. That's verbally. So that if somebody said, we just talked about this in the baptism class today. We talked about, so if somebody said, at work or a family member or a co-worker, whatever, said, oh, so you're a Christian. I remember one time when I was in high school, my supervisor, where I was working at a high school job, my supervisor, I can't even remember, his name was Nate, and I don't remember how old Nate was. I think he was old enough to be my parent, but he seemed ancient to me at the time. And out of the blue, like when you're 16 and an adult, starts talking to you, and it wasn't work related. Maybe it was just me. I'm like, why is he talking to me? Why is this guy talking? Why is he talking to me? And then he said, why do you go to church so much? I said, this doesn't have anything to do with my job. I'm the grocery boy at the grocery store. I put people's groceries in bags, and they take them out to their car. Why are you asking me about my church attendance? But that's what he wanted to know. And I just, I was 16, but I'm like, I don't know, and yeah, and I do, and I don't know. It was pathetic. I just couldn't come up with anything. So this. Be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us is this kind of, I should be ready to this story. Okay, boom, this is why I am. This is why I do what I do. This is me. As Tico Rice said, we should be ready to answer these questions. Who is Jesus? Why did he come? And what does it mean to follow him? Right? You don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to, be brilliant on this. Just it's this stuff. You can work on it. Who is Jesus? Why did he come? And what does it mean to follow him? In John chapter 4, we read a story there about a woman that meets Jesus. And in that conversation, he's kind of letting her know in the conversation that he knows some things about her. Like the fact that she'd been married multiple times, particularly. And the fact that they'd never met before really rocked her world. Like, whoa, this guy knows me. This guy, he knows things about me that he could never know. And she ends up, you got to read it, John chapter 4. It's a fantastic story. She ends up going back into the small village where she's from, having encountered Jesus. And what we find out just a little bit later is that she goes back, and what she has told them that is, come and meet a man who has told me everything about myself. What was she? She was a witness. I met Christ, and he told me about me. And they heard her, and they responded. Give a reason for the hope that is within you. So giving a reason, using our words, these are, of course, are all very important things. But here, in these metaphors, this is about being a witness by being a kind of a person, by becoming a kind of a person, by becoming a witness, by being salt and light and fruit. So Jesus said we should be salt. You are the salt of the earth, he said. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. Now, when Jesus said this in the first century, people used salt then for the same reasons they use salt now. They used it to preserve their food, to dry things out so that meats and et cetera could last longer. They would use salt to bring out the distinct flavor of a food. So 2,000 years ago, still using salt for the same reasons. Jesus, I think, is pointing out that salt, to be salt, needs to be in contact with something. Salt can't be salt, can't do what salt does if it remains in the salt shaker, right? It's got to be applied. It's got to be touching something else. It's got to be reaching and touching someone else. Like salt, Christians are called positively to impact the lives of other people by being in contact with them. You know, one of the things that happens when we become Christians is that, we have a world of friends. We just, that don't know Jesus. The other 2 weeks ago, I wasn't a Jesus follower. Most of my friends were not Jesus followers. But we become Jesus followers, and we love it. We should. It's perfectly normal. And we're hanging out with Christians now. We're going to, 3 community groups and 7 Bible studies and every week. And, we're just all in, and pretty soon all of our friends are Christians who love Jesus just like us. And then we don't know anybody who isn't not a Christian anymore. And it's hard to be salt if you never see any meat. I'm just saying. I think there's a message that Jesus is simply saying by connecting us to this metaphor. We need to be in touch and in contact with people, real people. People that might bother us, might irritate us, people that might be frustrated with us and confused why to them we seem so religious or spiritual, or disagree with our spirituality because they have another spirituality that thinks is not the same or better, and they can't figure out why we have to be so exclusive about this. And we need to be there with others. No good for salt to be in the salt shaker. We have to maintain our distinction. That's when he said, if salt loses its saltiness, it's no good anymore. It uses its function. We have to be distinctively followers of Jesus. I'm distinctively and uniquely a follower of Jesus, so I can continue to be salty. It's absolutely essential. As one writer said, salt is essential for life. So the follower of Jesus, you and me, are essential for the life of the world. Wow. Suddenly, I feel like my calling to follow Jesus seems a lot more significant because the life of the world needs me to be salty. And some of us are better at salty than others, I'm just saying, Some of us. A friend of mine said, I like this, so I'm getting her into my sermon today. She said, if I'm the salt, then God is the salt shaker. If I am the salt, then God is the salt shaker. What would happen if we started praying, say, okay, salt shaker, Heavenly Father, start shaking me where you need some salt. Wow, that could be a dangerous prayer. Second metaphor, light. He said, you are my witnesses. You're like light. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl, right? You don't light a lamp and then put a bowl on top of it. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. There's something going on here that is more than just me letting this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That was a children's song that I learned, Becky and I, and then we taught it to our children. This little light of mine, I'm going to, I think there's something going on here than just me and my little light. I think Jesus is asking for a community of light to be established on a hill. So the Shanghai Community Fellowship is a light in a dark city. This community of Jesus' witnesses, together we are a light on a hill. All of our little lights gather together as one big light on a hill in a dark place. There's a story in a book called The Third Way when Marcelino, who was a peasant fisherman, had heard someone read this verse that I just read about being a light set on a hill. And this is what he said in response. He said, "A lit-up city that sits on top of a hill can be seen from far away. As we, when he's fishing, can see the lights of San Miguelito in Nicaragua from very far away while we're rowing on the lake as they fish at night. A city is a great union of people, and as there are a lot of houses together, we see a lot of light. And that's the way our community will be. It will be seen lighted from far away if it is united by love." And what I really liked about Marcelino's observation was, as he heard that verse, he thought of something he does every day, every night. He goes out onto that lake in Nicaragua, and he fishes. And as he's fishing on that lake, he looks up every night. He can see it. This city that is San Miguelito, that up on the hill, and it's all these houses with all their lights on. And for Marcelino, it's like it's immediately a picture of what Jesus is talking about. All those lights together like a city where every house has a light, and it's magnificent, and you can't miss it, and it draws you to it. That's who we are, and that's who we are becoming. Jesus was the light of the world, and as light, he gave hope. I believe that Jesus was a hopeful person. I think if you walked with Jesus and spent time with him, you came away feeling more hopeful. And as his light shines in us and through us, I'd like to believe, and maybe this is really something to aspire to if we're not there already, that there's an SCF, there's a church, there's a community of witnesses in our city, and that people find that hopeful. I just stayed there for a few minutes this week as I got to thinking about that. Somebody walks by in the corner of Ulamuchi and Hung San Lu and sees a building and thinks, I bet there's a group of Christians that meet in that. It's a Christian building. It's a church. There's probably people in there. And they keep walking maybe, but somehow in their minds and in their spirit, they're hopeful. They're more hopeful. There are Christians in our city. There's a Christian community in our city, and it's filled with the light of God. I don't know. I just feel a little more hopeful. Jesus said we're light. His witnesses were light. And then he said that we are fruit. Now, we're not going to cover all the fruit today. We can do that in Galatians 5. We're going to talk about one particular fruit, and that's love. Jesus had a lot to say about love, especially when love becomes a witness. John 17, verses 20 to 23. My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message. So Jesus here is praying for you and me. This prayer is 2,000 years old. It was prayed about 2,000 years ago. But Jesus on that night was praying for people who would come after that night and would believe on him and follow him and love him and receive him and be his disciples, just like you and me. That all of them may be one. So listen, here's how he prayed, that we would be one. Father, just as you are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. You know, I over the years, maybe more in the U.S. than here, but certainly here, I've just taken note that people who are not Christ followers somehow still seem to know that Christians are supposed to love each other. Because when they hear that we're fussing and fighting with each other, like, aren't you guys supposed to love each other? Isn't that like a Christian thing? Isn't that what Christians do? They love each other, and they're quick to call us on it, right? Maybe that's happened to you, and maybe. Okay, nobody in this room, but maybe somebody was talking about somebody else in not so nice way, and this brother or sister at church, and someone says, I thought you guys were supposed to love each other. Like, what's up with that? You know, where's the love? Where's the love? This is a love, and speaking of love, I should say I like this. I don't want to confuse the word love. I was going to say I love this. I like this. Because the love that Jesus is talking about here is a love that he knew that came out of his experience within the context of the Trinity. So, you know, like God didn't make creation and make all of us because he was lonely and he just needed somebody to hang out with or someone to love or be loved by. Love exists within the Trinity of Father, Son, and God. It was already there. It was the perfect expression of love. The fullness of love is in the fullness of God. What's happened in Jesus is that you and I have been invited into this relationship of love between Father, Son, and Spirit. Hey, I'm opening the door to you. I want to invite you into the perfect expression of love so you can know what it's like to be loved. And knowing what it's like to be loved, you can love others. And that's how it works. Jesus knew that if we would be drawn into this perfect expression of the love between he and his Father and the Spirit, that we would walk in love, we would know what love was, we would experience this love, and people would just see the same in us. And the invitation would be extended again and again and again and again. Jesus prays for them to be unified and that their love for each other would keep them together. And the world would see that we are together, that we are united, that we love each other. And you've heard me say this many, many times over the years. I'll say it again. We said at SCF, with all these people from all over the world and often multiple Christian expressions, how do we stay together? We stay together because we really work at making Jesus the center of everything, and we make love the center of everything. We really want to love each other. And that becomes very, very important because Jesus said and prayed, when we love each other, it facilitates the unbelieving, blind world to know that Jesus really is the real thing and that it has come from the Father. How would they know that? How do they know that? When they see his people loving each other. It's a part of the way the message is communicated. I looked and I saw the last words Jesus prayed, because this prayer in John 17 was prayed the night that Jesus was betrayed. That night he would be in the Garden of Gethsemane. He would pray there while James and John and Peter slept. He would be arrested. The next day he would go to the cross. Jesus would say other things, but this is the last recorded prayer that we can see here, and except for if you exclude the prayer in the garden, of course. But he prays these last words before he's arrested. He prays, "Righteous Father, I have made you known to them, and I will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them." His last desire before he is arrested is to be able to love his own. And he looked all the way forward, even to another continent. And his last desire was to be able to love you and to love me. And that's what he prayed in that prayer. And to live in us so that we would know what God's glory, God's majesty, and his joy is, they're all about. You know, there's a verse in the last book of the Bible that describes Christians who have overcome. They've won their race. They have remained faithful. They have won the battle. And it says that they remained faithful and run the race, finished the race, and won the battle because of the blood of Jesus Christ and the word of their testimony. They win, we are faithful, we win our race, we win our battles because we are witnesses. We remain true to this calling to be a witness. And the story of our lives is the story that is being told in that God telling his story in and through you. So as I wrap this up today, and as I wrap this series up called Witness, I'd like to give a challenge here. And this is something we just did going through the baptism class. So for those of you who are in the baptism class, you're going to hear this a second time. If you were called on to tell your story of how Jesus became real to you, more than just a word, how you started following him, what happened to you, what was your life like before Christ, how did you meet Jesus, who told you about Jesus, how did you come to believe in him, what's happened since you started following him, what is your life like now, what is your witness? This comes from the good people at Crew. They said one way to look at it is to ask yourself about the opening. Paint a picture of what your life was like before Christ. What was your life like before Jesus? What was your life revolving around? What did you prioritize? What did you talk about all the time? Couldn't get enough of that. You were living for this. You were going for that. What was life like for you? The relationships, what did money mean to you back in those days? What was your life like before Jesus? How did you come to meet him? You know, my own story is that I came to meet Jesus as a child. I got to know who Jesus was as a child. Many of you have heard me speak before. You know, my parents were Christians, and they were Christians when I was a child, so they started taking me to church when I was like an infant, actually. And I was told about Jesus and who he was and why he came by adults in my young life that explained that to me, and then was encouraged to follow him. And I was a kid when that happened. And now over the years, I think sometimes we talk about this today in the class, that my story is a story of God's keeping grace. It's certainly saving grace. It's not like I walked into the kingdom and said, I'm here now. Aren't you guys glad I made it? You know, no. You know, I mean, it's just, but it was a keeping grace. The Jesus that I knew and loved and thought I understood at 8 years old looked very different when I was 12. And the Jesus that I was challenged to believe on and receive and follow looked very different at 18 than he did when I was 8. And it's a story of God keeping me in his grace. And you do realize that if your life is a play, right? Every life, what was that Shakespeare quote, which I'm not getting right now, but that your life is a story that's being told, you do realize that you are not the main actor on the stage. Jesus is. The main actor on the stage and the story of your life is not you, it's not me, it's Jesus, as he tells his story through me and through you. So how did you come to meet him? Maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a roommate, university, college, a co-worker, that person that wouldn't leave you alone, that co-worker kept telling you about how awesome his church was, and you ought to come sometime. You said, would you just leave me alone? Would you stop inviting me? And I don't know how all that happened for you. Maybe it was a crisis moment, or maybe over time, you had this growing sense and awareness. I think God is in my life. I think he's drawing me to himself. Maybe you wouldn't have put the words around it that way, but you knew something was happening, and you kept responding little by little. You got closer and closer to the kingdom, and you heard an invitation that made total sense to you because your eyes had been opened and you saw that this was a door that you should walk through, and you walked through it. How did you meet Jesus? How's your life changed since then? Just one or two ways. Think about it right now. What happened? How did your life change? What happened to you? Where did you find new peace or freedom or joy? And then you can kind of say quickly, well, you know, the bottom line is I used to be like this. And then I met Jesus, and now I'm like this. Now, as we finish, I'm talking about, and I'm talking to you as if everyone in this room is already following Jesus. Like you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you're already in, and you're on it, and you're following, and thanks, Pastor Dale, for the series. And yeah, I'm going to just, tune up on the witness thing, and I'm good to go. But perhaps you've been a part of our community, or maybe you're here today for the first time. or you're new to Shanghai and you've been here visiting a couple times now, 2 or 3 times, and you're not sure. You're not sure about Christian faith. You're here because you're interested. And you've been thinking, and you've heard this before, and you maybe even have an awareness that I think God is trying to get my attention. And I think he's drawing me to himself. And perhaps you are very, very close to the kingdom, and what you've been looking for is a door that you can walk through. A door that you can walk through. I have good news for you today. There is a door to walk through and into his kingdom. And that door is Jesus. The Bible says that if we believe in our hearts and confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord, we will be saved. It's like walking through that door. Believe in our hearts. You know, you have to receive Christ, right? I come to your house, if I came to your apartment and I stood and I knocked on your door, you know, you might even open the door. And there I am standing right there with all the slippers and shoes all around my feet, right? But I've never received, right? I'm still standing there. There's an act of reception. So we have to receive Jesus. He's there. Now I have to receive him. And I have to believe, not just believe that he existed, but believe that he is God's one and only true representative on the earth, and he's the way. And I believe on that. And I confess my sins to him. And I start to follow. I walk through the door. Would you walk through that door today? Let's pray. Father, I pray today for you have made us your witnesses. You've called us. You said, come and be my witness. And when we answered that call, we found healing. We found renewal. And picking up that role again, I am a witness. And we are witnesses. Father, I pray for anybody who might be here today who's longing and yearning for more. There must be more to life than this. I'm tired. Looking for a way into your kingdom, wondering if we will be received, asking, am I too bad of a person, and is it too late for me? I know, God, that by your Spirit, you can do way more than I could ever do in the words that I use to convince us and to remove the blinders from our eyes and to see what we could not see before. I am home. And I have a place in the Father's house. I have a place in the Father's house. Father, I pray that we would just, in a breath of prayer, receive you. Express our faith and our trust in you. Maybe put our stake in the ground to say, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. I'm home. And to enter in. Welcome to the joy of the Lord. Father, I thank you again today. May by your Spirit, may you work in us a new work. And may we, Shanghai Community Fellowship, be like a house of lights on a hill that brings people in our city hope that you are here. I pray all this in your mighty, powerful name. Amen.